My name is Renita Mitchell. I'm 29 years old. For most of my life, I've been known by a title no one ever said aloud, but everyone understood the family disappointment. It wasn't carved into a nameplate or whispered directly into my ear, but it lived in the way my mother sighed when I spoke, in the polite pity behind my sister's eyes, and in the smirk my brother wore like a badge of superiority. That Thanksgiving morning, I parked my modest Honda Civic between my brother James' Tesla and my sister Catherine's glossy Range Rover. Their cars gleamed like trophies. Mine looked like an afterthought. I took a deep breath and reached for the pie on the passenger seat, homemade, still warm, simple. Not that anyone would care. In my family, authenticity never mattered. Presentation did. The Mitchell estate loomed before me, marble steps, polished brass. The faint smell of cinnamon and money floating through the open door. Laughter drifted out from the living room, that confident, successful kind of laughter I'd grown up around. I adjusted my simple black sweater in the rearview mirror, brushed away a stray hair, and told myself the same thing I always did before walking into this house. Stay calm. Don't let them see it hurts. The door opened before I could knock. Renita, my mother said, her tone sharp enough to slice glass. You're late, again. Traffic, I replied, forcing a faint smile. She looked impeccable. A cream Chanel suit, every hair in place, pearls, resting perfectly at her collarbone. Her eyes, however, held the same familiar disappointment. Put the pie with the others. The others were from a boutique bakery downtown, each dessert packaged like jewelry. I placed mine quietly at the end of the table, knowing it would never make it to the dining room. The house smelled of perfection and expectation. Still working that tech thing? Catherine asked, gliding in with a wine glass balanced between manicured fingers. Her tone was light but edged. Something like that. She smirked. Well, at least you're working. Did you hear I made senior partner? Youngest in the firm's history. Congratulations, I said sincerely. Catherine was brilliant. She just made sure everyone knew it. James appeared next, the golden child of Silicon Valley. His startup was always on the verge of something big. He gave me a once-over and smirked. H&M having a sale. Target, actually, I said evenly. His chuckle filled the space like static. Cute. If only he knew that the tech support thing they mocked had quietly become a company governments now whispered about in boardrooms. But this wasn't the time. Timing was everything. Dad was in his study, surrounded by mahogany shelves filled with success stories that weren't mine. He looked up from his laptop when I entered. Glad you could make time for family, he said flatly. I always do. He nodded, eyes flicking back to his screen. I could see the spreadsheet reflected in his glasses numbers, graphs, performance reports. His world revolved around metrics, but he'd never thought to measure quiet perseverance. The dining room, as always, felt like a museum dedicated to achievement. Awards lined the walls. Catherine's framed law degree hung next to James's tech weekly cover. My mother's charity gala photos sparkled under spotlights, not one photo of me. When dinner began, the usual performance followed. Catherine's firm had just landed a billion-dollar client. James's app had gone viral again. Aunt Sarah gushed about Cousin Michael's latest merger. Every announcement came with a toast, a smile, applause. Then the inevitable pause. Aunt Sarah turned her perfectly painted smile toward me. And what about you, Renita, still? Doing whatever it is you do? The table went silent. All eyes turned to me. I set down my fork gently. Something like that. She leaned toward my mother and whispered not softly enough. Such a shame. She had so much potential. My mother's lips twitched. Well, at least she's independent, she offered weakly. Dad cleared his throat. Not everyone can be an achiever. Someone has to do the regular jobs. The words hit like small stones. Familiar, dull, yet strangely motivating. I took a sip of water and smiled just slightly. Tomorrow, when the Forbes article went live, they'd understand what regular really meant. Catherine twirled her fork, eyes glinting. You should talk to Mark at my firm. He's hiring entry-level associates. Could be a nice fresh start for you. Thanks, I said calmly. I'll think about it. In truth, Mark had sent me 3 emails that week, not to hire me, but to beg for a partnership deal with my company. As dinner carried on, conversation drifted between investments, luxury vacations, and the cost of living in mediocrity. Each jab slid across the table disguised as casual chatter. I smiled through all of it. If they noticed the quiet confidence in my voice, they mistook it for humility. Dessert time came. No one reached for my pie. My mother gestured to the store-bought confections, and everyone dug in as if sugar could sweeten superiority. Dad raised his wine glass. To the Mitchell family legacy, he announced. To ambition, success, and excellence. The crystal glasses chimed. I didn't lift mine. I just watched the reflections dance in the liquid, distorted, fragile temporary. Maybe next year will be Renita's year, Aunt Sarah said, with mock sympathy. Maybe it will, I murmured eyes, calm, voice, steady. Pass the turkey. Inside, I could feel the storm brewing not of anger, but of revelation. Because 5 years earlier, in a cramped studio apartment surrounded by wires, code, and empty coffee cups, I'd begun something they could never imagine. While they measured success in degrees and titles, I'd been building the kind of power that couldn't be framed on a wall. And tomorrow the entire world, including everyone at this table, would know exactly who I was. 5 years earlier, I lived in a cramped studio apartment that smelled of burnt coffee and overworked ambition. The space was barely big enough for a bed and a desk, but I didn't need much else. My real home was the glow of 3 monitors' lines of code running like veins of light through the dark. Outside, the city slept. Inside, I was chasing a dream no one believed in. Back then, I worked at a small tech company doing what my family called entry-level IT. To them, it was a dead-end job. To me, it was the perfect cover. My actual work wasn't fixing people's printers. It was writing algorithms that could bend the rules of computing itself. Quantum processing. The kind of thing my father might have called fantasy, and my siblings would have called a waste of time. My first employee, Marcus, was a soft-spoken engineer with sharp instincts and a caffeine addiction almost as bad as mine. One night, as we sat surrounded by empty takeout boxes and blinking screens, he said, "Renita, if this works, you realize what you're creating, right? This isn't just a new processor, it's an entirely new language." I smiled faintly. "If it works, Marcus." If. He leaned back, staring at me. "Your family should know. They should know who you really are." "They wouldn't understand," I replied quietly. "Not yet." I could still hear my father's voice from years before echoing in my head. "You're wasting your potential. The Mitchells don't settle for mediocrity." But I wasn't settling. I was redefining what potential meant. That night at 3 a.m., while the city lights blinked like indifferent stars, I solved the equation that had haunted experts for decades. My fingers trembled as I hit run, and for a moment the world went still. Then the monitor flashed a single word: success. Marcus turned to me, eyes wide. "You did it." I didn't answer. I just stared at the screen, feeling the weight of what it meant, not just for us, but for everything. A week later, we met with investors in a tiny conference room that smelled like recycled air and nervous energy. The first venture capitalist leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Miss Mitchell, this could change global infrastructure, defense, medicine, finance. We want in." I didn't smile. "You can invest," I said, "but I keep control." They blinked. They weren't used to women like me saying that. But I'd already learned something my family never had: real power. Doesn't come from approval, it comes from ownership. I took the smallest investment I could and built quietly. We operated out of a plain office with no sign on the door, no social media presence, no press releases. My company was invisible, but our impact wouldn't be. Every family holiday became an exercise in self-restraint. Catherine bragging about her clients, James about his startups, my parents about their legacy. Still working that little tech job, Mom would ask, and I'd nod. Meanwhile, I was negotiating government contracts and designing technology that would eventually protect national security. Once, after missing another family event, I received a text from my mother. "Darling James is hosting a networking party this weekend. You should come. Maybe you'll meet someone who can help you find a real job." I stared at it for a long time before typing back, "I'm busy building something that'll make his party obsolete." Then I deleted it. No point starting a fight they couldn't win. As months turned to years, my company grew quietly, steadily. We called it Mitchell Innovations, though I never told them that. It felt ironic to see their last name attached to something they'd never believe in. By year 3, we had teams in Tokyo, Zurich, and DC working under confidentiality agreements tighter than military clearance. The Pentagon approached us first, cautious and curious. Then came the Department of Energy, then NASA. Sometimes, as I sat in high-level meetings under fluorescent lights, I'd think about how Catherine once mocked me for wearing discount heels. Now generals and government officials waited for me to speak. Marcus would joke, "You could buy your family's entire estate and still have change left for dessert." "I don't want their house," I said. "Just their respect." "Do you think they'll ever give it?" I smiled. "I don't need them to. I just need them to see me." By the fourth year, we'd filed 6 patents and secured contracts worth hundreds of millions. Still, I drove the same car, lived in the same small apartment, ate ramen out of paper cups. Every cent went back into the company. Every ounce of pride, too. When Catherine bought her Range Rover, I was signing a deal that would revolutionize national defense. When James made the cover of Tech Weekly, I was finalizing a partnership with the federal government. And when my father raised his glass at dinner to toast ambition, I was quietly outpacing every Mitchell who'd ever lived. The turning point came when my CFO, Lila, burst into my office one Tuesday morning. "Renita," she said, breathless, "we've crossed $4 billion. I froze. $4 billion. In valuation. You're officially one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country." For a moment, I just stared at her. Then slowly, I laughed a quiet, disbelieving sound. $4 billion. The number echoed in my head like a heartbeat. And right then, as if the universe wanted to remind me of my roots, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "Don't forget Catherine's birthday dinner this weekend. Try to dress nicely this time, dear." I stared at the text until the words blurred. Then I set the phone down, leaned back in my chair, and whispered, "I think I'm done hiding." The Forbes reporter called a week later. Her voice was bright, eager. "Your work in quantum systems is extraordinary. We're featuring you in our 30 Under 30 issue." I hesitated. "This will make things different." "Different," she said with a laugh, "is the whole point." That night, I looked out the window of my office, an entire floor of glass and light I now owned. Tomorrow, the world would know the truth. But first, I had one last Thanksgiving to attend. The week before Thanksgiving felt like standing on the edge of a storm, the air too still, the silence too heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. My team moved with urgency around me, tying up final details before the Forbes release. On every monitor in my office, drafts of the article blinked in clean white text beneath the headline, "The Hidden Billionaire Behind the Future of Quantum Computing." Lila, my CFO, stood by the glass wall overlooking the city. "Are you sure about this, Renita? Once this goes live, anonymity's over. The quiet life, it's gone." I looked out at the skyline, the buildings lit like constellations of ambition. I've been quiet long enough. My PR director, a sharp woman named Ivy, poked her head in a tablet in her hand. "Forbes is locked for 6 a.m. Eastern. Interviews are ready for embargo." CNBC Wall Street Journal. "Bloomberg, everyone wants a statement. Let them wait," I said. "Tomorrow belongs to me." The room fell into silence. Even after 5 years of leading this company, I could still feel the tremor of disbelief in the air whenever I made a decision so casually about billions of dollars or national contracts. But that was the point. They'd underestimated me, too. When the day wound down, I drove home, not to the penthouse where my security detail waited, but to my quiet 3-bedroom house on the outskirts of the city. The house was simple. White walls, wooden floors, no designer furniture, just space to breathe. I poured a cup of tea and opened my family's group chat, the one that pinged every holiday. "Catherine dinner's at 2 sharp this year. Don't be late, like last time. Mom, and please, Renita, wear something elegant. We'll have guests. James." "Yeah, no hoodies this time." I smiled faintly. Typing nothing. They still saw me as the girl who barely scraped by, the one who showed up with cheap pie and thrift store sweaters. Across the kitchen counter, my laptop chimed. A security alert from our server cluster, not a breach, just standard updates. Still, I paused and checked the code out of habit. Every line I read reminded me how far I'd come. The same girl who was mocked for helping with computers had built the systems their entire industries now depended on. At midnight, Marcus called from Tokyo. "They're already talking about it here," he said. "Everyone knows something big's dropping in the States tomorrow." "Let them speculate," I replied. "We'll confirm it in 6 hours." He hesitated. "You sound calm. I've had 5 years to prepare for this moment." After the call ended, I sat alone in the quiet of my living room. The clock ticked softly. I thought about the countless family dinners, the small humiliations, the offhanded jokes, the polite pity that stung worse than cruelty. My family didn't hate me. They just couldn't see me. I used to think success would feel like revenge, but now it just felt necessary. Necessary to finally reclaim my own name. Necessary to stop hiding the truth about who I'd become. I glanced at a framed photo on the wall, the only family picture I kept. Taken 10 years ago at a beach trip. Catherine in sunglasses, James flexing his watch, Mom and Dad smiling as if we were perfect. I stood at the edge of the frame, half cropped, half forgotten. I stared at that image for a long time until my reflection blurred into it. Tomorrow, I whispered, you'll see me in full frame. Morning came slowly. The sun crawled through the blinds as my phone buzzed with early notifications, a flood of unread messages, embargoed interviews, calendar requests. Ivy's name flashed on screen. Forbes confirmed, she said breathlessly. They're going live exactly at 6 a.m. Your profile's the lead story. Thank you, I said. Let it happen. After hanging up, I made coffee and opened the online draft one last time. My photo, the one from the shoot I'd almost canceled, stared back at me. Headline, Renita Mitchell. The quantum pioneer who built an empire in silence. The first paragraph read, in an industry dominated by noise and ego, Renita Mitchell built her empire behind closed doors. Now her company, valued at $4.2 billion, is poised to redefine the future of technology. It was surreal. The secret I had carried for years was now a headline. At 6:00 a.m., the article went live. By 6:10, it had gone viral. By 6:20, my inbox had more than 800 new messages. Reporters, investors, government agencies, old acquaintances, suddenly remembering my name. My phone rang again. Lila, the Pentagon just issued a statement confirming your contracts. CNBC wants to schedule a live segment. Renita, it's chaos out there. I smiled faintly. Good. Let's give them something to talk about. Then I saw a text from Catherine. Renita, what is this? Then another from Mom. Call me right now. We need to talk. And one from Dad. 4.2 billion. Is this true? I didn't respond. Instead, I placed my phone face down, finished my coffee, and walked to my closet. Inside hung dozens of untouched designer dresses, gifts from sponsors, fashion brands, investors, but I ignored them all. My hand found the same simple black sweater I always wore to family dinners. As I dressed, the irony hit me. I'd built an empire on technology that could calculate infinite outcomes. Yet this moment, the look on their faces when they saw me felt impossible to predict. By noon, my driveway was already surrounded by cameras. Journalists waited outside my gate, their lenses aimed at the unassuming Honda Civic parked beside a black SUV with tinted windows. I could almost hear Marcus laughing from across the ocean. When I stepped out of the house, my phone buzzed again. Catherine was calling. I let it ring. Then Dad. Then Mom. I started the engine and smiled to myself. Today I'm not the disappointment. Today I'm the headline. As the tires rolled over the gravel, my reflection flickered in the rearview mirror. Calm, composed, unrecognizable even to myself. The world already knew who I was. My family was about to find out. Thanksgiving Day arrived like a movie scene, paused right before the climax. Quiet, charged, too still to be real. By the time I made my morning coffee, my name was already trending across every major news outlet. Forbes, Bloomberg, CNBC. The Wall Street Journal. They all ran the same story, the same photo of me, standing against the skyline, arms crossed. Headline, bold and gleaming, the billionaire who built a revolution in silence. Renita Mitchell. The world knew. My family didn't. Not yet. At 6:13 a.m., my phone began to vibrate uncontrollably. Calls, texts, missed video requests. First Catherine, then James, then Mom, then Dad. By the time Aunt Sarah's name flashed across my screen, I silenced the phone completely. I stood in the kitchen of my quiet home, sipping coffee while the world screamed my name. On the counter, my old laptop still displayed code, my first algorithm. I smiled at the simplicity of it. The world saw a billionaire today, but I still saw the girl who coded until her hands cramped. By noon, my PR director called again, her voice sharp with panic. Renita, you're front page everywhere. We've got CNN waiting Fox News begging for a statement, and the Pentagon just released a congratulatory press memo. Pause it all, I said. Today isn't about them. Then who's it about, family? She didn't understand, but she didn't argue. She knew I didn't do things without purpose. When I pulled up to the Mitchell estate at 2 o'clock, the air was different. The front gate had security guards now hired overnight, no doubt, to manage the sudden media chaos. My Honda Civic rolled to a stop beside their luxury vehicles, and for the first time it wasn't the cheap car. It was the car of someone who chose simplicity. One of the guards approached cautiously, clipboard in hand. "Miss Mitchell?" he asked, voice stiff. I nodded. He blinked, then straightened immediately. "Of course, ma'am. Sorry for the delay. Please go right in." I parked, grabbed the same pie I'd baked every year, and walked up those marble steps. Before I could knock, the door opened. My mother stood there, her hair perfect as ever, but her expression was shaken. Her usual poise cracked around the edges. "Renita," she whispered, "why didn't you tell us?" "Would you have believed me if I did?" I asked softly. Behind her, the house buzzed, not with laughter, but tension. Catherine stood near the staircase, her face pale, phone in hand. James hovered by the fireplace, his whiskey glass untouched. My father emerged from his study, a tablet still glowing in his hand, the Forbes article displayed for all to see. "4.2 billion," he said finally. His voice strange, careful. "Is that accurate?" "Give or take," I replied. "Markets fluctuate." No one laughed. For the first time in my life, the Mitchells had no words. Catherine broke the silence first. "You've been running that company, the one everyone's talking about?" "Yes." Her mouth opened, then closed again. She looked at her phone. "My firm represents one of your competitors. They've been trying to reach you all morning." I nodded. "They'll have to go through our procurement office. I don't take those calls directly anymore." James set his glass down too hard. "You bought Comtech last month." "I did." He blinked, realization dawning. "I was trying to pitch to them last quarter. You rejected me. Your proposal wasn't a good fit," I said simply. Aunt Sarah let out a nervous laugh from the dining room. "But you drive a Honda. It's reliable," I answered. Mom followed me into the kitchen, her heels clicking softly against the marble. "Renita, all this time. We thought—" "I know," I said. "You thought I'd failed. You thought I was small. I let you think that." She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. "Why? Why keep it secret?" "Because sometimes people don't believe in you until strangers do," I said quietly, "and by then it's too late for them to say they were proud." I placed the pie on the counter, the same one she'd always ignored. This time, no one dared to tell me to put it with the others. When we finally sat at the dining table, the silence was deafening. The familiar hierarchy was gone. Catherine's law degree, James's tech startup, Dad's business empire, suddenly small, fragile things compared to the quiet weight of what I represented. Uncle Robert cleared his throat, his voice thin. "Well, this is unexpected, is it?" I asked gently. "Or did you just never expect it from me?" Dad looked at his wine glass, then at me. "I owe you an apology," he said. "We all do." I smiled faintly. "You don't owe me anything. Just recognition that worth doesn't need to be loud." Catherine stared at me, her confidence unraveling. "You made it sound like you were struggling." "I was," I said. "Just not in the way you thought." Someone's phone buzzed, breaking the silence. "Mom's." She glanced down, gasped, and covered her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Renita. They're saying you got a $10 billion buyout offer." I didn't look up from my plate. "That's true." Her eyes filled with tears. "From who? The Pentagon." "They want full acquisition of our defense AI division." For a moment, everything froze. Then, in a surreal twist, Mom fainted right there at the table. Catherine jumped from her chair, catching her just before she hit the floor. "Oh my God, Mom." "She's fine," I said calmly, reaching for a napkin. "She just needs a moment. It's a lot to process." Dad rushed to her side, muttering, "10 billion. My God." James stared at me, pale and speechless. Aunt Sarah dabbed her forehead with a napkin, whispering, "You're extraordinary, dear. Truly extraordinary." I gave her a polite smile. "You didn't think so last year when I brought pie." As Mom came to, she blinked at me through tears. "Renita, I don't understand. We were so wrong about you." I leaned closer, voice soft but steady. "Maybe. But I'm not angry. I just wanted you to see what real success looks like. It's not the car, or the house, or the degrees. It's persistence when no one claps for you." The family sat in stunned silence. Somewhere outside, reporters' voices murmured through the gate. But inside, for the first time in years, my voice was the only one that mattered. Dad stood, wine glass trembling in his hand. To Renita, he said quietly, to our quiet revolutionary, I raised my water glass. To building instead of boasting. Crystal clinked soft and hesitant. The room seemed to exhale. Mom looked at me again, her eyes still glassy. What happens now? I smiled. Now we eat. The air in the dining room felt heavy, like the entire world had tilted slightly off balance. Forks rested midair. No one chewed, no one spoke. The hierarchy that had governed every Mitchell gathering for decades, unspoken, merciless, was gone. My father sat at the head of the table, his hands clasped tightly, the wine glass in front of him, untouched. He had always been the anchor of this family, the symbol of composure and control. But now his gaze kept drifting toward me, full of questions that words couldn't shape. Catherine finally broke the silence. I can't believe it, she murmured. You were sitting there all these years listening to us brag about promotions and clients while you were running the most powerful tech company in the country. I met her eyes. Powerful isn't the word I'd use. We're building tools that could save lives, Catherine. Algorithms that detect cancer cells before they form, that analyze environmental data to predict natural disasters. The Pentagon contract. That's just one branch. Our real work is humanitarian. James let out a soft, nervous laugh. And you didn't think to mention that once. To anyone I did, I said just not in words. You wouldn't have heard me anyway. His jaw tightened. For a moment I saw something flicker in his expression, guilt, or maybe envy. You made me feel like an idiot, he said quietly. I shook my head. You did that on your own. I just stopped correcting you. Mom's hands trembled around her glass of water. All those years. I thought you were lost. You missed birthdays, holidays. I thought you didn't care. I cared, I said softly. But I couldn't explain what I was doing. Not without risking everything we'd built. There were NDAs, classified projects, legal walls I couldn't break. Sometimes silence isn't distance, it's protection. Her eyes filled with tears again. Protection. From what? From disbelief, I replied. From mockery. From the idea that I had to prove myself before you'd see me. Dad leaned back in his chair, sighing deeply. Renita, I was hard on you. Maybe too hard. But you have to understand, I wanted you to live up to the Mitchell name. I smiled faintly. I didn't just live up to it, Dad. I redefined it. Catherine exhaled shakily. The article said your company's valuation doubled overnight after the buyout offer. You could retire tomorrow if you wanted. I could, I said, cutting my turkey calmly. But I won't. What I'm building doesn't stop with money. The next phase starts next quarter. We're developing technology for medical imaging that'll make early cancer detection available globally. Affordable. Automatic. Aunt Sarah wiped her eyes. You're saving lives. I nodded, trying to. For a while, no one spoke. The only sounds were the soft clinks of cutlery and the occasional nervous breath. Then James leaned forward. What does it feel like? What to prove everyone wrong? I looked at him for a long moment. It doesn't feel like victory, I said finally. It feels like freedom. Mom stared at me, her expression shifting from awe to something tender. Renita. I don't even know what to say. Then don't say anything, I said gently. Just listen. That's all I ever wanted. From the corner of the room, the family portrait seemed to watch us all, the framed moments of Catherine's graduations, James's business milestones, Mom's charity galas. Not one photo of me. I stood, walked to the cabinet, and opened the drawer beneath them. Inside, I placed the Forbes magazine open to my photo and headline. Now I said this wall finally has all the Mitchells on it. Catherine rose from her seat and walked over slowly, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She looked at the magazine, then at me. I was awful to you, she admitted. I met her eyes. You were just being who you were taught to be. Her eyes softened. Can I start over? I smiled. We all can. James poured himself another drink, his bravado cracking completely. You know, he muttered, I thought I'd be the one to make Dad proud first. You did, I said, just not in the way you thought. We all did in our own way. That's the problem, we only measured success in one direction. Dad cleared his throat, his voice low. To quiet revolutions, he said. I raised my glass again. to seeing people for who they are, not what they wear or drive or flaunt. The clinking this time was genuine. For the first time in years, dinner wasn't a competition. It was a conversation. Catherine asked about my company. James listened. Mom smiled through her tears. Even Aunt Sarah reached for a second slice of pie, my pie. By the time dessert ended, the tension in the room had shifted entirely. Laughter, real unforced laughter, echoed faintly across the marble floors. As I stood to leave, my phone buzzed again, a new headline notification. Mitchell Innovations announces breakthrough in cancer detection technology. I stared at it, heart swelling. The world was still moving faster than ever. Mom stood too, reaching for my hand. Renita, promise you'll come home more often. I squeezed her hand gently. Only if you promise to see me for who I am, not who you thought I should be. She nodded, her voice breaking. Deal. As I walked toward the door, I caught my reflection in the glass, calm, steady, unburdened. Behind me, my family sat together, smaller somehow, but more human than they'd ever been. Outside, the air was cold, clean. The night sky shimmered with quiet stars. My phone buzzed again, with calls from investors, reporters, senators, all wanting a piece of me. But I silenced it. Tonight wasn't for them. It was for the girl who once sat alone in a tiny apartment coding in the dark while her family doubted her. For the woman who'd built something so extraordinary it no longer needed anyone's approval. And for the family who finally listened. I looked back at the glowing windows of the Mitchell estate and smiled. For the first time I whispered, they don't see the disappointment. They see me.